The hallways of Pine Ridge High School were always quiet by 4 in the afternoon. Most students had rushed home, leaving behind empty classrooms and the faint smell of floor cleaner. But in the music wing, a slim woman with graying hair at her temples walked slowly, carrying a small box of supplies. This was May's third week as a volunteer at the school. She moved carefully, almost like she was trying not to be noticed. Her clothes were plain, just a simple blue sweater and dark pants, nothing that would make anyone look twice. As she pushed open the door to the music room, she smiled softly at the sight of the old upright pianos lined against the wall. Mr. Lopez, the choir director, glanced up from his desk where sheet music was scattered like fallen leaves. "Oh, hello." He paused, clearly trying to remember her name. "May," she offered quietly. "I brought those piano cleaning supplies you asked for." Right, thanks." He barely looked at her as he returned to frantically marking choir arrangements. The regional music competition was only 6 weeks away, and Pine Ridge hadn't placed in the top 3 for nearly a decade. May set down her box and moved to the nearest piano. She opened the top panel carefully, like someone greeting an old friend. Her fingers, thin but strong, began removing dust from places most people wouldn't think to clean. "You don't need to do the insides," Mr. Lopez said, not unkindly but with the distraction of someone with bigger concerns. "Just wiping the keys and polishing the outsides would be fine." May nodded but continued what she was doing anyway. "These felt hammers need attention," she said so softly he almost didn't hear her. "It affects the sound." Mr. Lopez looked up, slightly surprised. "You know about pianos?" May shrugged one shoulder, her eyes not meeting his. "A little. I played when I was younger." The choir director made a small noise of acknowledgement but quickly returned to his work. Volunteers with a little musical background were common, people who'd had a few lessons as children or played in high school band. Nothing special. In the corner, a lanky boy with wild curly hair was struggling through scales on one of the better pianos. His playing was technically correct but mechanical. Each note struck with the enthusiasm of someone completing a homework assignment. "Keep going, Thomas," called Ms. Wilson as she entered the room. The instrumental music teacher walked with the confident stride of someone used to commanding a room full of teenagers with trombones. Her bright red glasses matched her energetic personality. She spotted May and smiled broadly. "Hello, you're our new volunteer, right?" May nodded, her hands still working inside the piano. "Yes, I'm just helping with maintenance. Thank goodness for that. The district cut our piano tuning budget again this year." Ms. Wilson shook her head in frustration. "We're lucky if we can get someone in twice a year now." May's hands paused for just a moment. "When was the last tuning?" "Last spring, I think," Ms. Wilson sighed. "They sound terrible, especially the one in the practice room. We basically just use it as a large piece of furniture now." A small frown crossed May's face, but she said nothing. The room grew louder as more music students filtered in for after-school rehearsals. A group of vocalists gathered around Mr. Lopez, while string players unpacked their instruments near Ms. Wilson. Nobody paid much attention to the quiet woman working on the pianos, which seemed to be exactly how May preferred it. During a break in rehearsal, Ms. Wilson approached May again. "So what brings you to volunteer here specifically? Do you have kids in the district?" May shook her head. "No, I moved to the neighborhood recently. Wanted to help somewhere." Her voice was soft but had a pleasant, almost musical quality when she spoke more than a few words at a time. "Well, we appreciate it. Public schools can use all the help they can get these days." Ms. Wilson watched as May's fingers moved expertly across the piano action. "You seem to know what you're doing there." May's cheeks colored slightly. "My grandfather repaired pianos. He taught me some basics." "That's wonderful. Most of our volunteers can barely tell the difference between a piano and a harpsichord." Ms. Wilson laughed at her own joke. "Ms. Wilson," a frantic voice called from the doorway. A girl with a long braid stood holding a violin, her face pinched with worry. "I think my E-string is about to snap and I don't have another one." "Coming, Zoe," Ms. Wilson called back. She gave May an apologetic smile. "Duty calls. String emergencies wait for no one." As the teacher hurried away, May returned to her work, but her eyes occasionally drifted to the sheet music scattered across the room. Her gaze lingered particularly on a complex piece sitting open on the main grand piano, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. one of the most technically challenging pieces in the classical repertoire. When most of the students had left for the day, and Mr. Lopez stepped out to make photocopies, May found herself alone in the music room. The Rachmaninoff piece still sat open on the piano. After a moment's hesitation, she approached it, her fingers hovering above the keys without touching them. Her eyes closed briefly as though she was hearing music that wasn't actually playing. "It's intimidating, isn't it?" May startled and stepped back from the piano. Ms. Wilson had returned. "Sorry, I didn't mean to snoop," May said quickly. "No worries. That piece is for the showcase part of the competition. Bethany Kim is attempting it. She's our piano prodigy. Been playing since she was 4. Ms. Wilson smiled proudly. "Even she finds it challenging, and that girl could play Chopin in her sleep." May nodded, moving away from the piano. "It's very difficult. Do you play at all? Besides what your grandfather taught you about repairs, I mean." "Not really. Not anymore." May busied herself with packing up her cleaning supplies. Just simple things. Basic songs. Ms. Wilson didn't press further. "Well, if you ever want to plunk around on them after hours, feel free. Just not the grand, that one's our baby. But the others could use some attention." May thanked her quietly and finished gathering her things. As days turned into weeks, May became a familiar presence in the music department. She arrived each afternoon, quietly maintaining instruments, organizing sheet music, or helping with whatever odd jobs needed doing. The teachers grew accustomed to her presence, appreciating her help but rarely engaging her in conversation beyond simple instructions or polite small talk. What they didn't see was May in the evenings, after everyone had gone home. When the custodian, an elderly man named Ray who had taken a liking to the quiet volunteer, would let her stay behind to finish up some organizing. In those solitary moments, May would sometimes sit at one of the upright pianos in the practice rooms, never the grand piano in the main room, and place her fingers on the keys. She wouldn't play, not really. Just touch the keys, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips, sometimes pressing one note so softly it barely made a sound. One evening, Ray found her sitting this way, her hands poised above the keys but not playing. "You know," he said gently, "that old thing hasn't been played properly in years. Wouldn't hurt to give it some exercise." May looked up, startled. "I'm not very good," she said quickly. Ray leaned on his mop with a knowing smile. "Don't need to be good to enjoy it. Music's for everyone." After he left to continue his rounds, May sat for a long while in silence. Then, very softly, her fingers began to move. A simple melody at first, a folk song her mother had taught her decades ago. The piano was badly out of tune, but her hands moved with a grace that seemed at odds with her usual nervous demeanor. She didn't know that Ray had paused outside the door, listening with raised eyebrows and a growing look of surprise. Or that when she finished and hurriedly gathered her things to leave, he watched her go with a thoughtful expression. The next day, May arrived to find the practice room piano partially disassembled, with the school's maintenance supervisor frowning over it. "Piano tuner finally showed up," Mr. Lopez explained when he saw her confused expression. "Ray put in a special request, said this one was in desperate need." May nodded and went about her usual tasks, not meeting anyone's eyes. But later, when she thought no one was watching, she ran her hand gently across the newly tuned piano with the hint of a smile on her face. 2 months had passed since May first walked through the doors of Pine Ridge High School. Winter was settling in, bringing with it the nervous energy of the upcoming regional music competition. The hallways buzzed with excited chatter and the occasional burst of music as students practiced during lunch breaks. In the music room, tension hung in the air like a held note. Mr. Lopez paced back and forth, checking his watch every few minutes while Ms. Wilson spoke quietly on her phone in the corner. May organized sheet music nearby, pretending not to notice the worried glances they exchanged. "This is a disaster," Mr. Lopez finally said after Ms. Wilson ended her call. "Absolutely unbelievable timing." Ms. Wilson sighed heavily and sank into a chair. Bethany's doctor confirmed it. "Mono, she won't be able to perform for at least 6 weeks." May's hands paused over the music sheets. Bethany Kim was Pine Ridge's star pianist, the one student everyone believed had a chance at bringing home a first-place trophy. "The competition is in 2 weeks. Mr. Lopez ran a hand through his thinning hair. "There's no way we can prepare another student to perform the Rachmaninoff in that time." "It's just impossible. What about Thomas?" Ms. Wilson suggested half-heartedly. He's good, but not Rachmaninoff good. Not in 2 weeks. Mr. Lopez shook his head. We need that win, Janet. The school board already threatened to cut music funding again. A strong showing at regionals might be the only thing that saves this program. May continued organizing papers, moving more slowly now, her ears catching every word though her eyes remained downcast. We could try to find a professional to step in, Ms. Wilson said, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. With what money? We can barely afford to tune the pianos. Mr. Lopez laughed bitterly. Besides, the rules are clear. Only students or school staff can perform. May slid the last sheet of music into place and turned to leave quietly. Wait, Ms. Wilson said suddenly. What about staff? Does that include volunteers? Mr. Lopez looked confused. I suppose so, technically. Why? Ms. Wilson's eyes drifted to May, who had frozen in the doorway. May, you mentioned you played piano when you were younger, right? May turned slowly, her eyes widening slightly. Yes, a little, but that was many years ago. How little is a little? Ms. Wilson asked, a desperate hope creeping into her voice. Just basic songs. Simple things. May's hands fidgeted with the hem of her cardigan. Mr. Lopez looked skeptical, but desperation had made Ms. Wilson persistent. Could you maybe look at Bethany's piece? Not to perform it fully, just to help our vocalist practice until we figure something out? Even if you just played the main melody line. The color drained from May's face. The Rachmaninoff? Just the basics, Ms. Wilson hurried to add. Alexandra still needs to practice her vocal part, and she needs some kind of accompaniment. May looked like she wanted nothing more than to disappear through the floor. I don't think I would be helpful. It's a very complex piece. Just look at it, Ms. Wilson pleaded. That's all we're asking. If it's too much, we'll figure something else out. After a long pause, May gave a small nod. I can look. Relief washed over Ms. Wilson's face. Thank you. That's all we can ask. Mr. Lopez seemed less convinced, but nodded gratefully. The sheet music is on the grand. Take your time with it. As the teachers turned their attention to other matters, May approached the piano with careful steps. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the Rachmaninoff score. To anyone watching, she appeared terrified, overwhelmed by the complexity of the music in her hands. But a closer look would have revealed something else in her eyes. Not fear, but a flash of recognition. Like greeting an old adversary. Later that afternoon, Alexandra arrived for her scheduled practice. The tall, confident senior was Pine Ridge's vocal star, with a range that had already caught the attention of several college scouts. So, I heard about Bethany, she said, dropping her bag on a nearby chair. That seriously sucks. Language, Mr. Lopez corrected automatically. But yes, it's unfortunate. May has kindly agreed to help with a simplified version so you can at least practice your part. Alexandra looked May up and down doubtfully. No offense, but can you even play? Alexandra, Ms. Wilson scolded. It's okay, May said softly. I understand her concern. To Alexandra, she added, I'll try my best to help you practice, but I'm not a professional. Alexandra shrugged. Well, I guess something is better than nothing. Mr. Lopez handed May a simplified version of the score that he had quickly marked up. Just focus on these highlighted sections. They're the main melodic lines that Alexandra needs to follow. May nodded and sat at the piano bench. Her posture changed slightly, back straightening, shoulders relaxing, but it was subtle enough that no one noticed. She placed her hands on the keys and hesitated. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lopez said, checking his watch impatiently. May began to play, her fingers moving slowly, deliberately. The notes came out correctly but stiffly, like someone carefully reading a foreign language they once knew well but had forgotten. She hit a wrong note and flinched, then continued with even more caution. Maybe just try the first page for now, Ms. Wilson suggested kindly. Alexandra sighed dramatically. Can we at least get the tempo somewhere in the same zip code as the actual piece? Alexandra, please, Ms. Wilson cautioned. May is doing us a favor. For the next 45 minutes, May played with the hesitant touch of someone afraid of the instrument, while Alexandra sang beautifully but with growing frustration. The teachers offered May increasingly simplified versions, speaking to her in the slow, overly patient tones people use with very young children. Let's try just playing the root notes of each chord, Mr. Lopez suggested, marking the score again. See these notes here? Just play these ones. May nodded obediently, her face flushed with what everyone assumed was embarrassment. Only she knew it was something closer to indignation. After the rehearsal ended, Alexandra gathered her things quickly. "No offense," she said to May, "but we're never going to be ready in time this way." "I'm sorry," May replied quietly. "Not your fault," Alexandra said with a shrug. "But I've worked too hard to blow my chance at a scholarship." She turned to her teachers. "Can't we get someone else? What about Mrs. Patel from the elementary school? She plays for their choir." "We'll figure something out," Ms. Wilson promised. "Don't worry." After Alexandra left, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. "I'm sorry I couldn't be more helpful," May said, rising from the piano bench. No, we appreciate you trying," Ms. Wilson insisted. It was a long shot anyway. Mr. Lopez was less diplomatic. "We need someone with actual training. This competition is too important." May nodded, gathering her belongings. "I understand. I'll just go back to helping with organization." She left quickly, her shoulders hunched as if carrying a weight. The teachers didn't notice how her hands had curled into tight fists at her sides. That evening, after everyone had gone, Ray found May sitting alone in the darkened music room, staring at the grand piano. "Tough day?" he asked, leaning on his mop. May looked up, startled. "They asked me to play for them. And I played badly." She looked down at her hands. "On purpose." Ray raised an eyebrow but didn't seem particularly surprised. "Any reason why?" May was quiet for so long that Ray thought she might not answer. Finally, she spoke so softly he had to lean in to hear. "I left that life behind. For good reasons," Ray nodded slowly. "We all got paths we run from. Question is whether your reasons for running still make sense now." May's eyes flashed with something, pain or anger, it was hard to tell. "They do. Fair enough," Ray resumed his mopping. "None of my business anyway." "They need someone who can play well," May continued almost to herself. "For the competition. It means a lot to the students." Ray kept mopping. "Tough spot. The girl, Alexandra, she might lose a scholarship opportunity." "That's rough. Talented kid, that one." May stood up suddenly. "I should go. It's late." As she headed for the door, Ray called after her. "You know, sometimes helping others is the best way to help ourselves." May paused but didn't turn around. "Good night, Ray." The next few days were tense. Various solutions were proposed and abandoned. A parent with piano experience volunteered but struggled with the complex timing. Mrs. Patel from the elementary school tried, but admitted the piece was beyond her abilities. A professional pianist quoted a fee that made Mr. Lopez literally clutch his chest in horror. Through it all, Mee continued her volunteer work, quietly organizing, cleaning, and avoiding the grand piano as if it might bite her. She watched Alexandra's growing frustration and the teacher's increasing desperation with troubled eyes. One afternoon, a week before the competition, May arrived to find the music room empty except for Miss Wilson, who sat at her desk with her head in her hands. "Is everything okay?" May asked hesitantly. Ms. Wilson looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "Oh, May, no, not really. The school board called. If we don't place at regionals, they're cutting the program in half next year. I'll have to let go of the string section entirely." "I'm so sorry," May said, and meant it. 20 years I've been building this program," Ms. Wilson said, her voice breaking. "These kids deserve better." May stood silently for a moment. Then she took a deep breath. "The Rachmaninoff piece," she said carefully. "I could look at it again. Try harder." Ms. Wilson shook her head sadly. "That's sweet of you, but we both know it's beyond your skill level. It's not your fault." "Maybe I could practice," May insisted, surprising herself. "With more time." "The competition is in a week, May. Even professional pianists need months to master that piece." Ms. Wilson smiled tiredly. "But thank you for offering." May nodded and turned away, but something had shifted in her expression. As she went about her tasks that afternoon, her movements were different, more determined, less hesitant. And when she thought no one was watching, her fingers moved in the air, tracing invisible patterns that matched the complex rhythms of Rachmaninoff's most challenging concerto. 5 days before the competition, Pine Ridge High School's music department had the distinct feeling of a sinking ship. Students practiced with grim determination, but the absence of Bethany and her masterful piano skills left a hole that no one knew how to fill. Alexandra paced the music room, Her sheet music clutched tightly in one hand. "This is hopeless," she said to no one in particular. "Absolutely hopeless." May watched from her corner where she was repairing a loose violin string. The past few days had been a parade of failed attempts at finding a suitable pianist. The latest volunteer, the father of a sophomore trumpet player, had just left after a disastrous attempt at the Rachmaninoff piece. "That was enthusiastic," Ms. Wilson said diplomatically after the man had gone. Mr. Lopez didn't bother with diplomacy. "It was terrible. He played like he was wearing boxing gloves." Alexandra threw her hands up. "I can't believe this is happening. 3 years I've worked toward this competition, and now it's all falling apart because of stupid mono." May finished with the violin and placed it carefully in its case. She had been quieter than usual these past few days, lost in thought. Now, as she watched Alexandra's frustration, something seemed to shift in her expression. "I could try again," she said, her voice so soft that at first no one heard her. She cleared her throat and spoke a little louder. "I could try playing again. I've been practicing a little." 3 pairs of eyes turned to her with varying degrees of skepticism. "That's very kind, May," Ms. Wilson began gently. "But let her try," Alexandra interrupted. "We've got nothing to lose at this point." Mr. Lopez checked his watch. "I suppose we have time for one more disappointment today," he muttered. May approached the piano with the same hesitation as before, but there was something different in her posture now. She sat on the bench and adjusted it slightly, a small professional movement that went unnoticed by the others. "Which version should I use?" she asked, indicating the various simplified arrangements they had created. "Just use this one." Mr. Lopez handed her the least complex version, with only the basic melody line and chord structures marked. "Don't worry about the tempo or the difficult passages. Just do what you can." May nodded and placed her hands on the keys. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes briefly, and began to play. The first few notes were careful, deliberate, much as before. But then something changed. Her fingers moved with slightly more confidence, finding the correct keys without hesitation. The tempo, while still slower than required, was steady and even. Alexandra's eyebrows rose in surprise. Ms. Wilson leaned forward slightly. May continued playing, gradually increasing in speed and adding more of the supporting harmony than was written in the simplified version. Her body swayed gently with the music, no longer stiff and uncomfortable. "That's actually not bad," Alexandra said, sounding genuinely surprised. "You've been practicing," Ms. Wilson observed with a smile. May nodded without taking her eyes off the music. "A little." "At home." This was a lie. May had no piano at home. What she had done was return to the school late in the evenings when only Ray was there. In the darkened music room, with only a small lamp for light, she had allowed her fingers to remember what they had never really forgotten. She finished the first page and continued to the second without pausing. Her playing wasn't perfect, she simplified some of the more complex passages and slowed down in particularly difficult sections, but it was far better than anyone in the room had expected. When she finished the piece, there was a moment of stunned silence. "Well," Mr. Lopez said finally, "that was surprisingly adequate." Alexandra was already flipping through her music. "Can we try it with me singing? Just to see how it goes." They spent the next hour working through the piece together. May played with what appeared to be the upper limits of her ability, competent but not remarkable, much better than before but still clearly struggling with the most difficult parts. "You're holding back," Ray said later after everyone had gone. He had been mopping in the hallway but had heard everything. May looked up from where she was gathering her things. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean." Ray leaned on his mop. "You play like someone trying not to play too well." May was silent for a long moment. "It's complicated. Always is." Ray nodded sagely. "Question is, how long you gonna keep those kids from having their best shot?" "I'm helping them," May protested weakly. "Halfway." Ray shrugged. "Half help is sometimes worse than no help at all. Gives people hope when maybe they shouldn't have it." With that, he shuffled away, leaving May alone with her thoughts. The next few days fell into a new routine. May would arrive after school and take her place at the piano. She would play well enough to be useful, but never so well that anyone would question her backstory. The teachers were pleased with her progress, attributing it to natural talent finally emerging with practice. You must have had better training than you let on, Ms. Wilson commented during one rehearsal. May shrugged uncomfortably. My grandfather taught me more than I remembered, I guess. As the competition drew nearer, tensions ran high. Alexandra was determined to perform well, driven by the scholarship opportunities that might come from placing in the competition. The music teachers were fighting for the very survival of their program, and May found herself trapped in an increasingly difficult game of restraint. 3 days before the competition, they were working on a particularly challenging section of the piece. Alexandra kept missing her entrance because May was deliberately playing a complex passage too simply. It doesn't sound right, Alexandra complained. I can't find my cue when you play it like that. I'm sorry, May said, her fingers hovering over the keys. It's very difficult. Here, let me show you, Mr. Lopez said, reaching for his phone. I have a recording of how it should sound. He played a clip of a famous pianist performing the section. The music filled the room, powerful, complex, and beautifully executed. That's what we need, Alexandra said with a sigh. But I know it's too hard. May's hands trembled slightly as she listened to the recording. Her eyes had a faraway look as if she was seeing something beyond the room. Let me try once more, she said quietly when the recording ended. She positioned her hands and began the passage again. This time she allowed herself to play it a little more fully, a little more correctly. Still nowhere near the level of the recording, but better. Yes, that's closer, Alexandra said encouragingly. Can you do it again? May nodded and repeated the passage. Each time she played it, she allowed a little more of her true ability to show, as if she was slowly removing a heavy disguise. By the end of the session, she was playing the difficult section with reasonable competence, nothing extraordinary, but solid enough that Alexandra could follow her cues. I think we might actually pull this off, Ms. Wilson said with cautious optimism as they packed up for the day. Not a winning performance, perhaps, but respectable. Mr. Lopez nodded. Considering where we were a week ago, I'll take respectable. Only Alexandra seemed less than satisfied. As the teachers discussed logistics for the competition, she approached May privately. Can I ask you something? She said in a low voice. May looked up nervously. Yes? Are you playing your best, really? The question caught May off guard. What do you mean? Alexandra glanced over to make sure the teachers weren't listening. Sometimes I get this weird feeling, like you're holding back, like you could play better but you're choosing not to. May's face paled slightly. I'm doing my best, she said, the lie tasting bitter in her mouth. Alexandra studied her for a long moment. This competition means everything to me. If we place in the top 3, I have a shot at a full music scholarship. That's my only ticket to college. She paused, then added, My family can't afford to send me otherwise. May felt something twist in her chest. I understand. Do you? Alexandra's voice was intense but not unkind. Because if there's any chance you could play better than you're showing us, now would be the time to step up. Before May could respond, Ms. Wilson called Alexandra over to discuss her competition dress. The conversation ended, but Alexandra's words hung in the air. That night, May couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, her mind replaying Alexandra's words over and over. Outside, rain pattered against the windows, matching the turmoil in her thoughts. She found herself sitting at her kitchen table, staring at her hands. They were good hands, strong, with long fingers and pronounced knuckles. A pianist's hands. Hands that had once drawn standing ovations in concert halls across 3 continents. Hands that had been still for almost a decade now. There were reasons she had walked away from music, painful, personal reasons that still ached when she allowed herself to think about them. She had built a quiet life, a simple life where no one had expectations of her and no one was disappointed. But now there was Alexandra, with her dreams of college. There was a music program fighting for its survival. There were students who deserved a chance. May closed her eyes and for the first time in years allowed herself to truly remember. Her fingers moved in the air, playing an invisible piano, no longer pretending, no longer holding back. When she opened her eyes again, she had made her decision. The next morning, May arrived at school earlier than usual. The hallways were quiet, most students still in their first period classes. She made her way to the music room and found it empty, just as she had hoped. The grand piano waited in the center of the room, its lid closed. May approached it slowly, as if it might vanish if she moved too quickly. She ran her hand along its polished surface, feeling the cool smoothness beneath her palm. Then, with a deep breath, she opened the lid and sat down on the bench. For a long moment, she just sat there, her hands in her lap, gathering courage. Finally, she lifted her hands and placed them on the keys. And then, in the empty room with no one to hear, May began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 exactly as it was meant to be played, with technical brilliance, emotional depth, and the unmistakable touch of someone who had mastered the instrument long ago. The music flowed from May's fingers like water breaking through a dam, powerful, unstoppable, and completely natural. Years of restraint melted away as the complex notes of Rachmaninoff filled the empty music room. Her body swayed with the rhythm, her face transformed by an expression of pure focus and joy that no one at Pine Ridge had ever seen before. She was so lost in the music that she didn't hear the door open. Didn't notice Mr. Lopez stepping into the room, his arms full of sheet music. Didn't see him freeze in place, his mouth falling open in shock. For nearly 2 minutes he stood there, completely forgotten papers slipping from his grasp and scattering across the floor. The sound was so unexpected, so out of place in the humble high school music room, that at first he thought someone must be playing a recording through the speakers. But there was May, quiet, unassuming May, playing one of the most technically challenging piano pieces ever written with the confidence and skill of a concert pianist. Finally, a wrong step caused Mr. Lopez to bump against a music stand. The metal clattered loudly against the floor and May's hands jerked away from the keys as if they'd suddenly turned to fire. She spun around, her face draining of color when she saw him standing there. She started, but no more words came out. Mr. Lopez stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. "What was that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. May stood up from the piano bench, her hands clutching each other nervously. "I was just practicing," she said weakly. "That wasn't practicing." Mr. Lopez took a step closer. That was virtuoso level playing. His eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" The question hung in the air between them. He looked down at her feet, her shoulders hunched as if trying to make herself smaller. "I'm just May," she said softly. "Just a volunteer." "No." Mr. Lopez shook his head firmly. "No one plays Rachmaninoff like that without years of professional training, years of playing at the highest levels." He studied her face carefully. "I've heard that piece performed by some of the best pianists in the world. And what you just did?" He trailed off, still processing what he'd witnessed. May remained silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Why?" Mr. Lopez asked finally. "Why pretend you couldn't play? Why hide this?" Before May could answer, the door opened again, and Ms. Wilson walked in, followed by Alexandra. "There you are." "Victor," Ms. Wilson said to Mr. Lopez, "we've been looking everywhere for—" She stopped mid-sentence, noticing the tension in the room. "What's going on?" Mr. Lopez turned to her, his expression still stunned. "Our May has been keeping secrets from us." To May he said, "Play it again. Show them." May shook her head, panic flashing across her face. "I can't or won't." Mr. Lopez challenged, "What's happening?" Alexandra looked confused, glancing between the adults. Mr. Lopez kept his eyes on May. "I just walked in on our beginner volunteer playing Rachmaninoff's Third like she was at Carnegie Hall." Ms. Wilson's eyebrows shot up. "What? That's impossible," Alexandra said bluntly. "No offense, May, but you can barely handle the simplified version." "Play it again," Mr. Lopez insisted. "Just a few measures. Show them I'm not crazy." May looked cornered, her eyes darting toward the door as if calculating whether she could make a run for it. Instead, she took a deep breath and slowly sat back down at the piano. "Just a little," she conceded in a whisper. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment. Then, with visible reluctance, she began to play. This time she deliberately held back, playing well but nowhere near the level Mr. Lopez had witnessed. "No," he interrupted after a few bars. "That's not what you were playing before. You're still hiding." Ms. Wilson looked concerned. "Victor, are you feeling all right?" "That was quite good." "It was nothing compared to what I just heard," Mr. Lopez insisted. He turned to May, his expression a mix of frustration and wonder. "Why are you doing this? Why pretend to be less than you are?" The room fell silent. Alexandra stared at May with newfound suspicion. Ms. Wilson looked confused and concerned, and May sat frozen at the piano, feeling the carefully constructed walls of her quiet life crumbling around her. "I have my reasons," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "What reasons could possibly justify lying to us?" Mr. Lopez demanded. "Do you have any idea how much we've been struggling? How important this competition is?" May flinched at his tone. "I'm sorry," she said. "I never meant to cause problems. I just wanted to help, in my own way." "By pretending to be bad at piano?" Alexandra asked incredulously. "How does that help anyone?" May stood up suddenly. "I need to go," she said, grabbing her bag. "Wait." Ms. Wilson's voice was gentle but firm. "May, if Victor is right, if you really can play at a higher level, we need to know. The music program is at stake here. Students' futures." May paused, her hand on the strap of her bag. There was a long, tense silence. "What are you afraid of?" Alexandra asked, her voice softer now, genuinely curious. May closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had changed in her expression. A resignation, perhaps, or a decision. "I used to play professionally," she admitted finally. "A long time ago? Professionally?" Ms. Wilson repeated. May nodded. "I was a concert pianist. I performed with orchestras, gave recitals. It was my life." "Wait." Alexandra's eyes widened. "Are you saying you're actually good? Like really good?" A ghost of a smile touched May's lips. "I was once. Why stop?" Mr. Lopez asked, his anger giving way to confusion. "And why hide it?" May's face clouded. "Some stories are better left untold. Not this one," Miss Wilson said firmly. "Not when it affects so many people." May looked at their expectant faces and sighed deeply. She moved to a chair and sat down, suddenly looking very tired. "I stopped playing 8 years ago," she began quietly, "after an accident." The others remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "I was on tour in Europe. My husband and daughter were traveling with me." Her voice grew strained. "We were driving through the mountains. It was raining. The roads were slick." Understanding began to dawn on the others' faces. The car went off the road. May's voice was flat now, emotionless. "My husband and daughter died instantly. I survived with only a broken wrist." "Oh, May," Ms. Wilson breathed. "I couldn't play after that." May continued. "Not just because of the injury that healed eventually, but every time I touched a piano I heard them. I saw them. It was too much." She looked down at her hands. "So I stopped. I walked away from music completely. Changed my name. Started over." "Changed your name?" Mr. Lopez frowned. "What was your name before?" May hesitated, then answered softly, "Lin Yihan." Ms. Wilson gasped. "The Lin Yihan? The child prodigy who won the International Chopin competition at 17? Who performed with the Berlin Philharmonic?" Maun or Lin nodded almost imperceptibly. Alexandra looked completely lost. "Who? Only one of the most brilliant pianists of her generation," Mr. Lopez explained, his voice filled with awe. "She disappeared from the concert stage about 8 years ago. There were rumors, but no one knew what really happened. Now you do," May said simply. A heavy silence filled the room as they all processed this revelation. "Why come here?" Ms. Wilson asked eventually. "Why volunteer at a high school music program if you were trying to avoid music?" May's smile was sad. "Perhaps I wasn't running away as successfully as I thought. When I moved to this town, I kept finding reasons to walk past the school during practice hours. I could hear the music through the windows." She shrugged slightly. "One day I just walked in and offered to help. And then we forced you to play," Mr. Lopez said, understanding dawning on his face. "We made you confront exactly what you've been avoiding for years." "You didn't know," May assured him. "And you didn't force me." "I could have said no. Why didn't you?" Alexandra asked. May looked at the young singer thoughtfully. "Because music matters. Because what you're all doing here matters. And maybe because part of me was ready. Ready to play again?" Ms. Wilson asked hopefully. "I don't know," May admitted. "I really don't." Alexandra stepped forward, her expression determined. "Will you play for the competition? The real way, not pretending to be less than you are?" May's face showed her inner conflict. "I haven't performed in 8 years." "But you can," Mr. Lopez pointed out. "What I heard this morning. You haven't lost your abilities." "Technical ability isn't everything," May said. "Performance requires heart. I'm not sure I have that anymore." "I think you do." Ms. Wilson said gently. I heard it when you were playing just now, even when you were holding back. The music still lives in you. May looked at each of their faces, Mr. Lopez's wonder, Ms. Wilson's compassion, Alexandra's hopeful determination. Something inside her shifted like ice beginning to crack in spring. I need time to think, she said finally. This isn't easy for me. The competition is in 2 days, Alexandra reminded her, a note of urgency in her voice. I know. May stood up. I'll give you my answer tomorrow. Is that fair? They nodded, understanding that pushing harder might only make her retreat further. As May gathered her things to leave, Alexandra walked with her to the door. For what it's worth, the young singer said quietly, I think you should play. Not for the competition or the scholarship or any of that stuff, but for yourself. May looked at her with surprise. Music heals, Alexandra continued. At least that's what Ms. Wilson always tells us. Maybe it's time to let it heal you too. May didn't answer, but something in her expression softened. She gave Alexandra a small nod and then walked out into the hallway, her steps echoing in the quiet corridor. Behind her, Mr. Lopez turned to Ms. Wilson, his eyes wide with disbelief. Lin Yihan, he whispered, playing at our little competition. Do you have any idea what this means? Ms. Wilson nodded, equally stunned. If she agrees to do it. She will, Alexandra said confidently, watching May's retreating figure through the door window. I think she needs this as much as we do. That evening, May sat alone in her sparse apartment. On her coffee table was a dusty photo album she hadn't opened in years. With trembling fingers, she lifted the cover. There they were, her husband with his kind eyes and gentle smile, her daughter with pigtails and missing front teeth. Photos of concert halls, of standing ovations, of a life that seemed to belong to someone else now. Tears fell onto the plastic-covered pages as May traced their faces with her fingertip. For the first time in nearly a decade, she allowed herself to really look at them, to remember not just how they died, but how they lived. What would you want me to do? She whispered to the silent photographs. Is it time? The answer came not in words, but in a memory. Her daughter's delighted laughter as she watched her mother play, her husband's proud smile as he applauded from the front row. They had loved her music as much as she had. Had she honored their memory by abandoning her gift? Or had she only added another loss to the one she had already suffered? As night fell, May closed the album and moved to the window. The moon hung large and bright in the sky, casting silver light across her face. Somewhere in the distance, a nightbird called. Her decision was made. The morning of the regional competition dawned bright and clear. Buses lined the parking lot of Central City Arts Center as students from 20 schools across the state unloaded instruments and adjusted performance attire. Nervous chatter filled the air, along with the occasional burst of music as someone practiced a difficult passage one last time. Pine Ridge High School's music students gathered in a corner of the lobby, their faces a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Ms. Wilson moved among them with clipboard in hand, checking names and distributing programs. Mr. Lopez paced back and forth, stopping occasionally to give last-minute advice to nervous performers. Alexandra stood slightly apart from the others, her formal black dress making her look older than her 18 years. Her eyes kept darting to the entrance doors. Any sign of her? Mr. Lopez asked, coming to stand beside her. Alexandra shook her head. Not yet. She said she'd be here, Ms. Wilson reminded them, though her voice betrayed her own uncertainty. The previous day, May had returned to school with her answer. Yes, she would play. But she'd been quiet about it, almost solemn, and had left immediately after rehearsal with a simple promise to meet them at the competition venue. What if she changed her mind? Alexandra whispered. What if she'll be here? A gravelly voice interrupted. They turned to see Ray, the school custodian, standing nearby in an uncharacteristically clean shirt and tie. Ray, what are you doing here? Ms. Wilson asked with surprise. Wouldn't miss it. He nodded toward the door. And look who's arrived. They all turned to see May walking through the entrance. For a moment, no one recognized her. Gone was the plain-clothed, unassuming volunteer. In her place stood a woman in a simple but elegant black pantsuit, her gray-streaked hair swept up in a neat bun, her posture straight and confident. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that commanded attention without seeking it. Wow, Alexandra breathed. She looks like a completely different person. As May approached, they could see the tension in her face, the slight tremble in her hands as she clutched a small bag. "You came," Ms. Wilson said warmly. "I promised I would." May's voice was steadier than they expected. Mr. Lopez stepped forward. "How are you feeling?" May considered the question seriously. "Terrified," she admitted with a small smile. "But ready, I think." Alexandra impulsively reached out and squeezed May's hand. "You're going to be amazing. We perform in 2 hours," Mr. Lopez explained. "You're registered as May Lynn, school staff, as we discussed." "No one knows," he trailed off. Not needing to finish the thought, May nodded. "That's how I want it. This isn't about me or my past. It's about the students, about Alexandra." "There's a practice room available for warm-up," Ms. Wilson offered. "Thank you." May glanced around at the bustling crowd, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "It's been a long time since I've been in a place like this." Ray stepped forward. "I can show you where it is." Bit quieter through the back hallways. As they walked away, Alexandra turned to the teachers. "Do you think she'll really go through with it?" "When the moment comes?" Mr. Lopez watched May's retreating figure thoughtfully. "I don't know. But either way, she's already shown incredible courage just by being here." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. Other schools performed their pieces, some impressive, others less so. The Pine Ridge students completed their individual and small ensemble performances with varying degrees of success. Then it was time for the showcase performance. Alexandra and May backstage. Alexandra found May sitting perfectly still, her eyes closed, hands resting in her lap. "It's almost time," Alexandra said softly. May opened her eyes. "How are you feeling?" Alexandra laughed nervously. "I should be asking you that." "I asked first," May said with gentle insistence. "Scared, excited, like I might throw up or faint or both at the same time." Alexandra smoothed her dress for the 100th time. "But mostly, I'm just grateful. Whatever happens out there, thank you for doing this." May stood and took Alexandra's hands in hers. "Listen to me. When we go out there, I want you to forget about the judges, forget about the scholarship, forget about everything except the music. Can you do that?" Alexandra nodded, though she looked uncertain. "Music isn't about being perfect," May continued. "It's about being honest, about connecting. I forgot that for a long time." Her eyes grew distant for a moment, then refocused. "Let's remind each other, shall we?" A stagehand appeared at the door. "Pine Ridge High School, you're on in 2 minutes." Alexandra took a deep breath. "Ready?" May nodded, a calm settling over her features. "Ready." They walked to the stage wings where Mr. Lopez and Ms. Wilson waited. The teachers gave last-minute encouragement, straightened Alexandra's collar, wished them both luck. "And now," the announcer's voice echoed through the auditorium. "From Pine Ridge High School, Alexandra Diaz performing When I Have Sung My Songs by Ernest Charles, accompanied by May Lynn on piano." They walked onto the stage together, into the bright lights. The audience applauded politely. The grand piano waited center stage, gleaming under the spotlights. May approached it with reverence, adjusted the bench, and sat down. Alexandra took her position beside the piano, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. May looked up at Alexandra and gave her a slight nod. Then she placed her hands on the keys. The opening chords of the Rachmaninoff piece filled the auditorium. From the first notes, something electric happened in the room. Heads lifted. Whispers ceased. Even the restless teenagers in the audience grew still, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. May's fingers moved across the keys with fluid grace, drawing sounds from the instrument that it might never have produced before. Her body swayed slightly with the music, her face transformed by complete immersion in the piece. This was no high school accompanist. This was artistry of the highest level. In the audience, confusion spread. Judges leaned forward in their seats, programs rustling as they double-checked who was performing. A few of the older music teachers looked at each other with widening eyes, mouths forming silent questions. Alexandra, momentarily stunned by the magnificent sound supporting her, almost missed her entrance. But May glanced up, caught her eye, and gave her an encouraging nod. The young singer took a deep breath and began. Her voice soared above the piano, strong and pure. Whatever nerve she had felt backstage vanished as she was carried along by May's masterful playing. They moved through the piece together in perfect synchronicity, as if they had performed together for years. In the wings, Mr. Lopez gripped Ms. Wilson's arm so tightly she would later find bruises. "My God," he whispered. "She's not holding anything back." "No," Ms. Wilson agreed, tears streaming down her face. "She's finally letting go." Halfway through, the piece came a section where the piano took center stage, with a complex solo passage that had been simplified in all their rehearsals. Now May played it as written, a breathtaking cascade of notes that showcased technical brilliance while expressing deep emotion. A murmur rippled through the audience. A few people stood up for a better view. One of the judges dropped his pen. When Alexandra's voice rejoined the piano for the final section of the piece, they created something truly magical together. The young singer, inspired by the magnificent accompaniment, found depths in her own performance she had never reached before. As they built toward the finale, the energy in the room was palpable, every person leaning forward holding their breath, completely captivated. The final notes rang out, powerful and perfect, and then faded to silence. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the audience erupted. People leaped to their feet, applauding wildly, some shouting, "Bravo!" A few of the older music teachers were openly weeping. The judges looked shell-shocked. Alexandra stood in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the response. Mee remained seated at the piano, her head bowed, hands still resting on the keys. When she finally looked up, her face was wet with tears, but her eyes were clear and bright. Alexandra extended her hand. May took it and rose to her feet. Together, they faced the audience and bowed. As they walked off stage, they were immediately surrounded by their Pine Ridge family, Mr. Lopez unable to form coherent sentences, Ms. Wilson hugging them both at once, students jumping up and down with excitement. That was unbelievable. Did you see their faces?" The words tumbled over each other. Through the chaos, a distinguished older man in a tailored suit approached. The crowd parted for him instinctively. He was Joseph Torres, one of the most respected music directors in the state and head judge of the competition. "Excuse me," he said, his eyes fixed on May. "You are Maylene?" She nodded, suddenly tense. "May I speak with you privately for a moment?" Mr. Lopez stepped forward protectively. "Is there a problem?" "No problem at all," Torres assured him. "Just a question about the remarkable performance we just witnessed." May touched Mr. Lopez's arm gently. "It's all right." To Torres, she said, "We can talk." They stepped away from the group. As soon as they were out of earshot, Torres spoke quietly. "You're Lin Yi-han, aren't you?" After a brief hesitation, May nodded. "I thought so. I heard you play in Vienna 15 years ago." His eyes were kind. "We all wondered what happened to you." "Life happened," May said simply. Torres nodded, understanding in his face. "What you did up there today, it was a gift. One I never thought I'd experience again." He paused. "Will you be returning to performing?" May looked back at the group from Pine Ridge. Alexandra still flushed with excitement, the teachers beaming with pride, Ray standing in the background with a knowing smile. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "This was for them, not for me." "I think it was for both," Torres suggested gently. "Music has a way of healing what's broken in us." He handed her a business card. "When you're ready, if you're ready, call me." No pressure, no expectations, just an open door. May took the card and slipped it into her pocket. "Thank you." When she rejoined the group, they were still buzzing with excitement, speculating about their chances of winning. "What did he want?" Alexandra asked curiously. "Just to compliment our performance," May said, not quite meeting her eyes. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Other schools performed, though none created quite the sensation that Pine Ridge had. When it came time for the awards, no one was surprised when Alexandra and May took first place in the showcase category. Alexandra also received a special scholarship award, presented personally by one of the university representatives who had been in the audience. As they loaded back onto the bus for the return to Pine Ridge, exhausted but elated, Alexandra sat down next to May. "You did it," she said simply. "We did it," May corrected her. "What happens now?" Alexandra asked. "Will you go back to being, famous?" May gazed out the window at the sunset painting the sky in brilliant colors. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But for the first time in a very long time, I feel like I have choices again." "You'll stay at Pine Ridge though, right? At least until graduation?" May smiled. "I think I can manage that." "Good." Alexandra settled back in her seat. "Because I have a lot to learn from you." "And I from you," May said softly. As the bus pulled away from the venue, May closed her eyes and listened to the happy chatter of the students around her. The weight she had carried for so long felt lighter somehow, not gone completely, but transformed into something she could bear. Music had found her again, or perhaps she had found her way back to music. Either way, she was no longer hiding, no longer pretending to be less than she was. And for now, that was enough.